Welcome to another episode of Behind the Dreamers. I'm Jennifer Loading, and we are talking to the achievers, the creators, the magic makers, and the dreamers. These are our friends, these are your friends, and they are living the extraordinary. Well, I am super excited about my guest today. I was reading over his notes. He's had such an interesting journey. I'm so excited to talk to him today. Most recently, he spent 5 years researching and writing a part memoir, a biography, a genealogical mystery, and his story focused primarily on his parents who somehow survived the Holocaust camps and tried to restart their lives. And so I am so excited to hear from him today and let him share with you guys about his story and what he's up to. But before we do that, we must do a shout out to our sponsors. So today's episode is brought to you by Walt Mills Photography. If you are a creator needing post-production, consultation, or promotion, Walt is your guy. Whether short films, YouTube films, photography work, or a new headshot, he can help you find a solution to match your needs. To learn more about him and his work, you want to go to photosbywalt.com. We also want to give a shout out to our friend Chris Clow of Upbeat Media Production. If you are in need of turnkey special event production, Chloe is your go-to. To learn more about him and his work, you want to go to upbeatmediapro.com. All right, Max, I am so excited to get you on here today. So Max Friedman is the author of Painful Joy, which was published in April 2022. He says it represents 5 years of intensive research in the U.S., Poland, Sweden, Israel, and Germany. And Max seeks to unearth and understand the real life stories of his parents, Sam and Frida, two poor Polish Jews. In the process, he discovers their roots, recreates their lives and times, and uncovers their remarkable journey and painful secrets. So welcome, Max. We are so excited to have you here on the Behind the Dreamers.
Thank you. Lovely to be here. Wonderful.
It's going to be fun. Yeah. So yes, I was looking over all of the things that you've done and just kind of your journey, like where you've been. And I'm like, wow, this is so, I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but like what a journey.
Doing the book, Painful Joy, as you said, took 5 years, but it actually took a lifetime. Because it took me till I was almost 70, or a few years before, to even begin to try to tackle it. And most of my life I spent trying to avoid it. It was a story that we lived every day as young children and growing up, taking care of our parents more than they were taking care of us. And so I had distanced myself from the story, not from my parents, but from the story itself, because, again, we survived their survival, in a sense. So it took some time, and it took actually a question from my grandson to spur me to do more.
Yeah, that's so interesting that you said that. And you probably, when you're, I think in any, not to compare your situation to anybody else's, but I think when you're kids, you just become accustomed to what you become accustomed to, right? Like that's what you know. You don't really know anything different until later on when you start to question things, right?
Yeah. What we knew for certain is that our lives were not normal. We knew that what we saw in school, with our friends and people we knew, it was just very different. And so we had different ways of coping with all that. And over time, it was just become, as you said, sort of background noise, loud background noise, but noise nevertheless. And so I had gone into my past a number of times, a little bit, just sort of putting my foot in the water and to see how it felt. And it felt interesting, but not that compelling, because it was just so raw, I guess is the way to put it. And so it was only when I had talked to my grandson, who was then about 8. He's now almost 15 and a teenager, God help us, but a lovely, lovely kid, a growing kid. But I had talked to him about a little bit about survival and about my parents being survivors. And I guess he didn't understand that well at age 8. But I told him that people sometimes, including parents, can be difficult, and they come from lots of different places in their lives, and so it's just something he should know as he gets older. And then one day he came to me and he said, "So you were talking about survival and survivors, and that uh, your mother and father were survivors. And what does that mean? Does that mean that you were a survivor in some way, that you gained some strength from that?" He said it in his own way, but basically what he said was, could he become a survivor, somebody who could deal with very difficult things when he got older? And I said, I hope so, but I haven't a clue. And that in 2016 is when I started this sort of fantastic voyage where I was surprised at every turn, learned things about myself as well as learned things about my parents and about the past and about history and about what hate can do. And so it became all consuming in a certain way. And now that it's done, I guess I want people to know the story too and to share it and to see what they can get out of it themselves.
Yeah, no, this is so good. And I was going to ask you, and thank you, because you kind of clarified that for me. Like, what was the inspiration behind this, right? And I think it's so interesting that your grandson must be I feel like such a deep little thinker, like to bring this, because you're telling me this, and I'm thinking he's 8 years old and he's thinking about this, like he's listening to every word that you're saying, and he's like, "Can I be a survivor?" And so I think that
Yeah.
is so awesome. And what comes to mind when you're telling me about this, I had a gal on my show who, I don't know if I shared this with you. It's funny how when I do these shows, I always think about other people and their stories that come up. But I had a gal that she had developed breast cancer, completely different story. Her husband developed pancreatic cancer. He died within 6 weeks after being diagnosed. And then she decided to go on this journey to find the meaning of love. Like, what does that mean? And so she goes to Haiti and she has all these crazy stories. And she comes on the show and she's telling me about this chicken that's stalking her at night, all these crazy stories. But the point that I'm trying to tell you about this is that she said that every time she thought she had the meaning, she learned something different. She found it in another way and learned a different lesson. And so it was really neat. She only got to share, like, I think one or two of them. I need to get her book and read it, because it was just really neat to see how, she's talking about, I'd go in and I'd look for the meaning of it in this way. And I'd find that was not the way I found it. Something else arrived at my door and taught me a different lesson. And so in just listening, I haven't read your book yet, but in listening to you talk about this and you saying the things that you find out about yourself. And I think that's part of what happens when we do these kind of I think it's like cathartic work, right? Like, it's really about finding things out, and we learn about ourselves in that journey.
Yeah, I think, and as you sit with the book, as you sit with Painful Joy and an individual, and including me, it sort of sinks in, and you have revelations of one sort or another, insights that come over time. They don't come automatically; they come over time. I mean, uh, in Painful Joy, I talk about our childhood. So half the book is about their journey, and then we meet them as we were born. My older sister, and I were born in Sweden. That's where they met after the war, after their liberation from the camps. And uh, when so half the book discusses all that, and we bring ourselves in for the other half of the book to say, so what does that mean? What did that mean to our lives, and how did all this sort of turn out in the United States? We moved to the United States in 1952, and uh, in the book, we lived in Coney Island, which is the amusement park in southern Brooklyn, and we lived in a tiny little apartment. We had no money and any of that. And one day, my father worked 6 days a week, so it was Sunday, and there was a banging at the door. And my sister was 7, I was 4.5, 5, but the memory is clear. And there was a banging at the door, open up. it was the landlord, and he needed our rent, and we hadn't paid. And my mother says, "Get into the closet." We
Mm.
go into the coat closet with her. Be quiet, and until the banging stops and the guy goes away. Right?
Right.
It's terrifying for a little kid, and
Yeah.
it was a searing memory. And only I mean, I've been talking about this book now for quite some time, did the book for 5 years, and only a few months ago did it occur to me we were scared. And that's how I focused on that memory. The memory was about my sister and I being terrified by, in this standing in this dark closet. And in fact, it was only then that I started to think about, well, what did my mother feel going into that closet?
Right.
Because in that closet, the memories of the German soldiers knocking at her door as they're pulling people out to put them in the ghettos, or all of that. And that just, it was like, an epiphany, like, my God, she must have been even more terrified than we could ever be to
Sure.
relive that history. So it's that kind of thing. And the book itself, one could see how things that we thought were true were not true. Things that we had heard from them turned out not to be true. And at first, I was surprised and a little sort of upset, like, why did they tell us this? And then I came to understand that as well. And
Hmm.
and I think that journey for anybody is something that is useful and makes you grow. Even at 73, you can still
Yeah.
grow.
Yeah, that's such a great story, though, Max. And I, I'm like thinking so many things when this is, you were talking about that. It's like, yeah, you have that moment where, and it's all our perceptions, right? Like I was telling somebody this the other day that, as children, we have perceptions about the way things were, right? And our parents always have a little bit of a different perception. I mean, we all know
Right.
this to be true at any level, right? And it's so funny how you can have these conversations, but I think it's so, I guess, remarkable that you were able to come back and say, okay, you can see this in a different light as well, that it wasn't just about y'all's perception, but it's also, what was your mother thinking in that moment, putting yourself in her shoes for that moment and being able to see that. So, wow, I just think that's awesome. I don't know. I think that's so awesome because a lot of people
Yeah.
can't even do that. They get so wrapped up in their stuff, they can't even
Yeah.
begin
And
to
and
understand
that's that,
somebody
that's
else's.
really at the end of the day when people would say, so what do you want people to take away from the story?
Yeah.
Uh, and one of the very important things that I want people to do is gain a greater sense of empathy for other people,
Mm,
because you start with these two strangers, these two sort of people who you start where they're born in these little villages in Poland, and you follow their journey, and some of it is sort of interesting, some of it is frightening and heartbreaking, some of it is even heartwarming, and you get to know them. And by the end of the book, I think this is just people who friends of mine who read the book and said at the end they couldn't put it down because they wanted to
mm,
know not how it ended, because we all know how these books end in a
right.
certain way, but more how did they deal with all of this, and because you get to actually like them, or maybe in some way care for them, and you never can put yourself into their shoes because you wouldn't want to, and you wouldn't, and if I think about it, I don't think I could have survived what they survived, but
Yeah.
but you're at least able to understand that these are people. They're not just one of 6 million who were killed, or just nameless sort of faces. They were actual human beings whose humanity was taken away from them. And the idea of the book is to restore their humanity.
Yeah, yeah. I want to read it, Max. You got me sold. I
Okay,
want to read
you
it.
can
I want to read it now. I'm like,
call up
you got
Amazon.
me.
It's all
Yeah,
yours.
you got me wanting to read this now. I'm gonna have to go get the
Okay,
book. So this is good.
okay.
That's good. I want to hear. But and I love that you're. It's and that's the thing. I think that's what writing is all about. Even whether you're telling a story, a personal story, or it's about how do you get the reader to connect with the people, the story, the people,
Exactly,
the people in
exactly.
there, the characters. And so obviously these are real life stories, but still we want people to feel that emotion, and that rawness of the story. So, and I know you've done journalism work for years and stuff. I was looking at all your stuff, and you've had, like I said, you've had such a interesting and dynamic career in many, many ways. And so I'm excited to read this book. I do have a question I want to ask you just from the writing side of things, because I write some stuff. I've done a book, and I always say, as an author, and I don't know, maybe this is, some people find this, some don't, the hardest part for me every time I'm trying to put something together, I'm working on a program now, it's always the organization of the outline. It's getting how I want things to flow, because I just want to write. I just want to sit down and I just want to start writing, right? And then I'm going to organize it. It's always that way. So I'd love to know, maybe, as you were putting maybe this book together, like maybe like, because I don't know if the writing part was hard for you, but maybe like one of the challenges for you as a writer, was it the traveling, getting all the stories together? Was it actually putting it together? Like
Yeah, yeah, it was like everything. Because
everything?
I had written, as you say,
Yeah.
I've spent my whole professional life writing, and I've written hundreds of stories and profiles and
Mm-hmm.
interviewed hundreds, if not more than hundreds of people. But
Yeah.
uh, but one of the things is, as you know, in writing, getting those first words down is what
Yes.
really counts,
Yes.
right? I mean, if you can do that, then you can do the rest,
Yeah.
and I always would have my opening and my close, and then everything in the middle would. In this case, it was so it was so far reaching in terms of the amount of information I had to try to gather and the sources, because many of the sources had been destroyed.
Mm.
Many of the records had been destroyed during the war, uh, and they were in other languages that I didn't speak. They were in thousands of different places, and so it was a monumental task. So I decided I wasn't going to think about writing. All I was going to think about is the story itself should start coming to you over time, and that's what happened. And it was only toward the middle to the end of this 5 year journey that I actually figured out what the story was. Not
Mm.
that it was about my parents, but it was a story in a way about a different kind of love. And that's where, because and it came to me when I was actually looking for some way to title the book. And and I found this little thing somewhere which talked about a poem that was written in the Middle Ages, and it was about love that has been touched by death. And I said to myself, well, that's what this is. And it was written in Yiddish, but it was translated in the 1950s. It was called Painful Joy. That was the name
Mm.
of the poem. And I said, well, and the reason why I could grasp that was because in my own way, I never saw the love that my parents had for themselves, for each other. Uh, their love was so tarnished by all that they had lost. I mean, my father had a wife and two little girls. My mother had a husband. She told us stories about him, which turned out not to be true, but she did have that. Everybody was murdered. Everybody. It was just
Wow.
the two of them on their own. Uh, and and they fought. They fought constantly. There was just screaming and fighting and threats about killing themselves. I mean, it was horrible.
Yeah.
And and so the love part only came when I was going through the Swedish archives of all places, and somebody who worked at the archives was helping, and she found a bunch of letters that my father had written, and it was a letter that he had written to a lawyer who was trying to help him emigrate to the United States. And it was a letter all about love.
Wow.
that he had met this woman 2 days before, and they had fallen in love with each other. And now, and he was religious, right? And even if they couldn't marry, they were going to live together. And he wanted to know whether this lawyer could help her emigrate to the United States, and maybe one day they would marry. And
Wow.
it was beautiful. It was written in Hebrew. I didn't know Hebrew, but someone translated it, and it was beautifully written. It was poetic, and it opens the book. The book is a, and it just then all came together. It came together about what kind of journey brings you to that point when you can find somebody else who understands you, as many survivors only married other survivors because no one else could understand the emotions and the
Right.
traumas that they had been through. Uh, so, so in writing that, everything else sort of start coalescing. You can go from the beginning. I wrote the book as though it was two different stories. It was first a story about my father, then a story about my mother. And then the stories come together when they meet. And then the story takes a new turn when they meet us, when we are born. And we come to the United States, and it takes a different turn. And there are different stories because those are the stories that I know. The
Yeah.
other stories I had to impute. Uh, anyway, so
Yeah. That's
that's a
so
long way
awesome.
of saying
No.
I apologize,
Yeah, no,
but
that's good. And I was
yeah,
picking up when you were talking in the very beginning. All of it's good, Max. I want to read the book. So I said, I'm just listening to you. I want to read
mm,
the book now.
yeah,
Um, when you were talking in the beginning, when you came up with the title, and it's so funny because I was kind of, when you said that, I'm like, I get this because there's that moment when you're trying to write something and you're trying to piece things together. And then all of a sudden that light bulb goes off and you're like, that's the message. That's what I'm trying to convey in this piece. And then it all just kind of comes together, right? It's like
yeah,
you can't force that, but when it starts to flow and it comes together, then you know that's what it was supposed to
right,
do. I think it's so
yeah,
good.
yeah,
It's good.
and especially when you grow up for many years thinking that love was not really there. I mean, it was
Yeah,
sort of devotion. It was leaning on each other, having just another person,
sure.
trying to survive with another person. And yet that it became a love
Mm,
story between two people, a love story of the love story that they had that they lost,
yeah,
the other love story of their lives, and how they coped with all that. And I think that's what the book really does is it explains in ways that I couldn't have imagined how they actually survived and how they coped with their survival the rest of the and then what happened to my sister and me in terms of what those traumas did to us.
sure, sure. Yeah, yeah. And I never like to say I know how somebody feels. I just can say I can only imagine.
Yeah, right,
You know,
exactly.
yeah. So I do want to ask you kind of a question. I think this is kind of a deep question, and I think it really is going through this because I feel like you kind of went through a journey in this. This wasn't just about writing a book. This was a journey for you.
Mm-hmm.
What do you feel like you learned about yourself in this process, going through all this? I mean, there's got to
I
be a lot.
became yeah no but I became a wiser survivor myself. If I had to tell my
Yeah,
grandson because someone once told me that I was at work. I was working for a number of years for a large company, and I was in charge of communications. And I had a boss who was a terrible guy, a bully. I used to call him a terrorist. Uh, and I worked for him for 10 years. And then one day I went to a management retreat, and there were industrial psychiatrists there. And they were there to help us handle workplace problems that we had.
mm,
And everybody had to bring their workplace problems. So I brought my workplace problem being my boss. And And the guy sort of listened to me, and he asked me then a little bit about my background. And for whatever reason, of course, I said, well, I have these two parents. It was a difficult childhood and
Sure.
difficult even growing up with them. And then he said, well, you know what? Even though he was being paid by the company, he said, you should leave. You should leave because you are mimicking your parents' survival. And he
Mm,
said, they couldn't escape from what happened to them. You can.
mm,
So he said, one day you'll wake up 20 years from now and you'll say you're surviving enough.
wow.
And the point, unfortunately, is that I didn't leave the company, actually.
Mm,
I was not yet a wise survivor. Uh, Fortunately, he did. So, so the story ended without a resolution, in a sense.
yeah.
And it was only in recalling that within the context of what I was learning about survival, their story, did I come to understand, have again another sort of epiphany that I could perhaps pass on to my grandson or
Yeah.
to my children as well.
I like that wiser survivor. I like that. That's good. That's good. I have to write that down because it's funny how, and in that moment, you probably like you're going through all that, and I think you can look at that situation very differently as you're saying now. I think sometimes when you're in those moments, you can't perceive them the way that they're intended to be perceived, right? It's in hindsight that we learn the
Yeah,
lessons in those moments, right?
exactly. I never really, in all the years, I never really thought of myself as a survivor. I thought of
Yeah.
myself as somebody was who persevered. That's what I thought
Mm,
of, and maybe that's a synonym for surviving in a
yeah.
certain way. But I don't give up. I just don't give up. I find different ways of workarounds, whatever it is, but I don't want to be defeated. Uh, but but hearing it from him, I said, well, he's sort of right, isn't he?
Yeah.
But then again, you look at the practical terms of your life and you say, well, I have these two, they were twin. They're my kids were young twin boys at the time. And, I was getting paid pretty well.
Right.
Starts looking for another job, do all this. It was hard enough to get this job. I'd been freelance writing and doing other things, and this was a steady, nice job. And so I said, I'm going to survive this. And again, circumstances helped.
Sure.
Otherwise, I don't know what I would have done.
Yeah. Well, I love it. I think sometimes we have to go through these hard things sometimes to
Yeah,
find the lesson. One of the I don't know if you're familiar with John Maxwell. He's a speaker, and I think he's a former preacher, but he's a speaker now, and he does a lot of stuff on leadership, and he always talks about this. He has a book that says, sometimes you win and sometimes you learn. And so I always
yeah,
say, that in these moments when we have these, questionable situations, when it's easy enough to kind of, sometimes it's a bad situation where we recognize it's a bad situation. Sometimes we don't necessarily know it's a bad situation until we can look back in hindsight and say, I was surviving, right? But I think when you can learn to find the lesson in those moments, that's what I think where the real victory comes, because you now recognize, hey, there was something to be said in that. And even in your circumstances, when I hear you say that I'm a survivor and that I was persevering, I think even in these traumatic situations that you grew up, you do learn some valuable skills of persistence and tenacity and all of those things, and I say that all the time even when I'm working with clients and stuff, and they've had these situations, not of course like yours, but situations where they've had to deal with, things have been
mm-hmm.
handed to them. There are some great skills that come out that you learn in those moments, even in the bad
Yeah,
situations.
right. And
So,
and throughout when I got to the point where I was visiting the concentration camps and the death camps and all this other stuff, and you're just you don't know what to say, you don't know what to do. Uh, or learning even the names of my father's two little girls who were
yeah.
murdered.
Wow.
And you just sort of break up. Uh, but throughout it all, there is, you get to understand. So how did they get through this? How did these two individuals actually make it through when everybody else didn't? I think the statistics are something like 3 to 4%
Made it.
of the people who uh, were in Poland at that time, when the Germans came in, actually survived,
Wow.
uh, and of the Jews at least. So
Mm-hmm.
it's frightening. And what I learned was that, or what I think, because who knows, and we never spoke about it to them. We were afraid to talk to them about their lives. Uh, and it was only when Schindler's List came out
Yeah.
that I reluctantly went to see it. And in seeing it, I saw my mother's story. Because my mother's
Mm.
story essentially was what that film showed, except she wasn't one of the Schindler Jews who were saved. So,
Wow.
but she went through the same camps. She had the same camp commanders. She met the same horrible people, and she lost everybody within that context. And the craziest thing of it all, or maybe not the craziest, there are so many crazy parts of the story, was that when we were going to visit Poland for the first time and to try to find the places where my parents had grown up, had lived, there was only one place that we could still find, and this was in Krakow. And uh, so I went to Google. It was right before we were going to go on our trip, and I went to Google just the address, which was Josefa 12 in Krakow, which is a beautiful, beautiful city. Uh, and the suddenly I see all this stuff about Schindler's List in this write up about the building,
Wow.
because essentially Steven Spielberg used the building my mother lived in for 25 years, and where her family lived, and where they were all taken to the ghetto and then to the camps, or worse, uh, as a central set for his Krakow ghetto part of the film, and it became a tourist attraction. And suddenly there was this whole thing about Schindler's List and Steven Spielberg and all this other stuff. And we go there, and there are tours going through the building.
Wow.
And it's the first time that I actually walk over to anybody. And I walked over to the tour guide, and she was leading actually a group of Italians, but she was speaking in English. And I said, my mother lived here. My mother's family lived here, and most of them.
Mm. Yeah.
And it was the first time I actually said that to a stranger. And it was sort of a breakthrough in the sense that I convinced myself that this had really happened, that this was real, that this was not one of my mother's fantastic stories.
Wow. Wow. You're giving me chills. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
As I said, I need
sorry.
to read this because I'm like feeling like when you were talking about the kiddo, the murdering of the family members and stuff, just gives me chills. I'm
Yeah,
gonna check. I'm gonna get your book. I need to read it. I definitely need
okay.
to read it.
Amazon.
Max, I'm like, yeah, I feel like we could be, you could just tell me your whole book. We'll just be here forever and you could tell me that whole book. But I think we need to save it and make our people go get it. So
Okay.
here's
All
what
right.
I want to say. Where do we want to send our people if we want them to go check this? It's on Amazon, correct? Is that where we want
It's
them to
on
go?
Amazon, and I have my own website that I actually built myself,
Okay,
and I
very
had to
cool.
persevere to do that, to say the
I know.
least,
I've done that. I'm with you. I
and
totally get it. I get
and
it.
screw
What,
up
what,
like. So anyway, the it's maxfriedman.net.
okay.
So if you www.maxfriedman one word.net, so you can find out more about the book, where to get it, how to get it, and also there are other things in there, interesting sort of pieces, including some excerpts from the book for those who just want to see what does it sound like. Pictures that we didn't use in the book that are there too, for people to sort of look at and sort of try to recreate some
Yeah.
of the background for this whole effort.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Well, what we'll do, Max, when this goes out, I'll make sure that your website gets in there so they know where
sure,
to find your page and find this
sure.
book. So
Great.
this is good. And I'm going to go check it. I'm going to go get it when I get off of here with you so I
Okay.
can read it.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing all that. And wow, I mean, just like I said, what a journey for you. And hopefully, through that process, like you said, you're able to look at this in a different light. And I think it is, going through these kinds of things. It's like I said, that cathartic release that we need to do to get some kind of closure too and bring it all in. And so hopefully, that spark from your grandson was the right thing to do. And maybe he'll also come to appreciate that too. So I think
Yeah. I hope
I
so.
think it's all a good thing. I think it's a good thing. So thank you for being authentic. Thank you for being real. Thank you for sharing with our people. And we'll make sure, like I said, that they know where to find this book when we
Okay.
get this out.
Great. I
And
appreciate
then,
it.
of course, yeah. And of course, we do want to say to our audience, if you enjoy our show, please be sure you go check us out. Give us a rating on iTunes. Go hit that subscribe button on YouTube so we can keep sharing all these amazing stories. And go get Max's book. Check it out. Read it. Let him know what you think. And we want to leave you guys with a final parting thought. Same thing I always say, Max, every single week. In order to live the extraordinary, you have to start. And every start begins with a decision. You guys take care, be safe, be kind to one another. We will see you next time.